I'm going to stop sharing for a second.
I hit record.
Oh, you hit record? Okay, awesome. Awesome. Sorry. Let me share again. Thank you. Okay, so this is a home server that I set up around Christmas time. It was just for the purpose of it. It was originally a game server. Then I broke off the game server into its own thing for my boys to play Rust and all this other games on. And this is just a deploying server. It's got all of these different home server type applications, the Plex, if you're familiar with it, and so forth. So I had this idea for a while. I didn't have time to implement it. So I'm going to kind of implement it here in front of you guys so you guys can sort of see a big, giving Codex a very large task to complete and watching it sort of do its thing. So I'm going to go. So my idea here is I'm going to take my original home server, and I'm only going to do this as a PR. I'm not going to actually merge it in. I'll create another repository later for it. But I'm going to take my original home server concept, right? And for context, what I'm doing here is I'm literally just using Terraform to deploy Docker containers to a bunch of computers that I have here in my garage that function as basically a gaming server, home server, etc. Right? And in fact, if I go into 192.168.42 and I open up Portainer, hold on, go in here, you'll kind of see here what's running. I've got this is the gaming server. I've got Minecraft server that's paused, Roblox server, Rust server that's running. Portainer is the tool that you're watching here, and then I've got a bunch of GitHub runners that I run on both of the machines just to offset my GitHub action costs on my personal side of the house. So you kind of get a chance to see how this is going to work. The idea that I had here is, okay, I'm going to take this this home media server stuff that I've already built and that runs all of this stuff, and I'm going to completely change it. I'll call this later like business server or something like that, right? But the idea that I had that I wanted to try out was I'm going to go to Codex. Come on. Why is this? Give me one sec. Why is it? Figure out, make sure I'm understanding. Okay. Can you guys still see?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to go here. So I saw this on Twitter. Somebody had listed all of the SaaS products that are out there and their open source equivalents, right? So they had listed Notion to AppFlowy, Zoom to Jitsi, Jira to Plan, et cetera, right? And so I'm gonna basically have the model create a PR to modify all of the Terraform in my home server setup to function the same way, but instead of deploying all of those home service tools that I showed you guys earlier, I wanted to deploy these specific tools into Docker containers so that I could play around with each of these individual projects, in and of themselves. The machine has about 32 gigs of RAM, so it should be fine. I may want to eventually upgrade and add a 64 gig system. I have room for 64 gigs on one of the machines. I just haven't implemented it or used it in a while. And it's all old hardware. It's like DDR3, so it's not a big deal, right? So what I do here is I want to basically target the home server, which is the repo that I showed you guys earlier. I'm going to basically give them all of these different applications, and I'm going to basically just in plain English tell it like, hey, take the existing home server Terraform scripts and deploys, and while keeping Portainer. Now that's important because I want Portainer to be in every one of my scenarios. Portainer is how I go in here and I manage. In fact, let me log into the actual Portainer that I'm actually going to deploy this to. So I'm going to log into 66. I haven't had time to set up, since Christmas, I haven't had time to set up localized DNS, so apologies that I'm using addresses. But so again, this is a different one. This one, it runs Audiobook Shelf, which I store all my Audible audiobooks into. This runs Image, which I have turned off for now. But that's basically like it's an open source Google Photos alternative that basically, allows me to store all my photos on the server, back everything up, but still have access to it and be able to read through it and that sort of thing. All right. So I'm going to go back in here, take the existing home server Terraform scripts and deploy and deploys while keeping Portainer Docker container deploy. Okay. And then replace all of the existing Terraform scripts. In fact, you can say all of the other existing Terraform scripts with the list of open source tools above, deployed via Terraform into their own Docker containers, right? And then also update the README to read business servers and describe each tool and how it relates to its commercial SaaS counterpart. Right? Very simple. All right, so the idea here is that I'm going to basically let it rip, vibe code basically like Stephen was describing, but I'm going to test it once it's done, right? So the idea here is let it rip and essentially replace all of the existing scripts that are in the home server. So home server has all of these as part of his infrastructure stack, right? All of this stuff, and it's going to basically replace it with specifically with all of these, right? So while this is going to take a while. So while this is running, I'll talk a little bit about the stuff that I was doing with Clear Core and other in the website outside. Okay, cool. So while that's running, I can click on here. I can kind of watch what the agent is doing. The agent is basically pulling down my home server repository. It's going to do a number of searches in the repository. So it's going to basically do a bunch of grep commands to look for specific things within the repo and that sort of thing. So we'll come back to this. We'll come back to this. So to kind of show you what the output looks like, I'll kind of pick this is, for example, this is a reduced unused CSS rules that I ran last night, but it didn't complete until this morning. So that was where you saw the 7:08 a.m. So I'm going to click on this one. So for this one, this is for the Clear Core website. And for the Clear Core website, so the thing that I was trying to do here, and this actually, you need to pull where this, I'm pulling this from. So I took both of our websites and I ran them through. Sorry, the thing here is blocking. I can't see. I'll just use this for now. Okay, so I ran through the clearcoredigital.com, ran it through Google's PageSpeed web dev tool, essentially, and that lets me know how that particular website is performing specifically, right? And it shows you all sorts of cool stuff, like it shows you first cut contentful paint. Like if you ever used this before, what this is basically telling you is, hey, this is how quickly it takes for your website to load on a browser, right? And Google gives us these tools because they want us to work on improving all of our efficiencies and all of our stuff, make the website page as fast as possible, so that users, they can recommend the page on Google search, and users can be confident that they're going to be able to jump into a page that isn't loaded. If these numbers are relatively low, then Google will put you lower in the search rankings and in the search ratings, because obviously they want to promote content. Like this is part of PageRank, the PageRank algorithm. They want to promote content that is as efficient and as fast as possible to run, if that makes sense. So does that, have I lost anybody? This is the other stuff is still running, so we'll come back to it later. So the idea here is that I wanted to take each of these individual inefficiencies, right, that it's describing, and address each one, right? So in this case, this one that I ran last night was to essentially reduce unused CSS estimated savings of 11 KB. This is basically what it's telling me is that we have some CSS on the page for Clear Core that gets loaded but doesn't have to, right? So it's telling me that, hey, like there's CSS that can CSS for Burke, for your context, is just the thing that makes the web page look pretty. Like that's basically CSS code, CSS rule, or CSS markdown. And what this is telling me is, hey, you could do a better job of how you load your CSS. So you only load what is necessary, and then what is unnecessary, what doesn't render, can be sort of pushed down the fold, right? And it says here, and it's telling what to do, like reduce unused rules from style sheets and defer CSS not used for the above fold content to decrease bytes consumed by network activity. Like this is directly pulled from one of these. I'm trying to remember which one it is. Is it network dependencies? It's this one, right? So it's directly telling me what to do with this particular approach, right? So in this case, I had it basically, I basically fed what it told me to do into the Clear Core repository, and this is kind of what the model came up with. The agent basically implemented lazy loading in React. It basically broke out the case study information as a lazy loading function. It added a separate lazy loading route to it, right? And it did all of this sort of thing. Like it pulled out the stuff that didn't necessarily need to load right away, and it pulled it into its own case study CSS, so that when the case study loads, the CSS for case study loads as well, right? It's doing all the things that I would basically hand over to a junior developer or a mid-level developer. Hey, tackle this. Imagine this is your ticket, essentially, your technical ticket for doing something. It's basically doing all of that, right? And then from that, it generated a PR, which I created. And I go into here, and you can kind of see how it functions here, right? It gives me the full PR breakdown. Like I didn't have to sit there and let it run and then create the PR myself. It just generated the PR as well. It did fail last night, which is why I didn't end up doing it until this morning. And so let's look back at what it did with the failure. The failure was a build failure. So you can see here that it failed to do tailwind components and layered components. And so off of that failure error, it reworked itself and came up with the fact that, hey, it removed the at layer wrapper, and basically that fixed the build error that it was having, which is why the first one failed and the second one passed, right? And so that's kind of the approach here. And so you can see here all of the code changes are there ready for review. In fact, you can see here it's all the same stuff that you saw here, but now it's in a format that I can hand over to Mike now, and he can basically go in and review it. So I'm going to put here to request him to review it. Because I have access, we have access to Copilot. I have access to Copilot. I can also ask Copilot to request a review. I'll usually click on this when somebody else gives me a PR, just for the purpose of like, hey, let's speed this up. Like let Copilot find the potential bugs or the potential errors that are in that particular PR that makes all of our. I mean, I've been reviewing PRs for the better part of 2 decades now. This is a gold mine in terms of just being able to pick up stuff that I haven't caught, or just be able to catch stuff ahead of time. It will do a much better job. I've been doing it for 20 years, and this will do a much better job at reviewing PRs than I ever could. So highly recommend using it. If your concern is like, hey, is something going to break with this? Is this not a good approach, way to do it? And what I like about it is the fact that, yeah, Copilot is still using OpenAI's model, but it is like having models check models work, right? So in this case, Codex, which is GPT 5.2, did the development for me, and then Copilot, which is also probably GPT 5.2, is going to basically do the review if I were to do a request for it. Have I lost anybody? Is everybody kind of on the same page? Brooke, are you comfortable with what we're showing so far, or do you have any questions before we proceed?
You can proceed. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So now it's just a matter of reviewing this particular changes, right? And so if I go into the requests, you can see here that all of these were for the most part generated by by the model using Codex. And so it's just a matter of giving it to Mike and say, hey, go through these individually, use Copilot to review them if you want to. But basically, somebody needs to go in and approve these and make sure that it's not going to break anything before we get it fully merged in. And the hope is that once all of these get merged in, where was the yes? The hope is that at some point when we rerun this, I'll probably wait like a day to fully rerun it because I know that some stuff. I know Cloudflare might cache some stuff since we cache everything through Cloudflare, and so I'll give it a day before I completely rerun this. And I have another browser window that's open with all with everything that I want to kind of rerun, and so it'll just remind me that hey, I need to come back a day later and just rerun this to make sure that the changes that I made actually applied and implemented and fixed the issues that Google is telling me are issues 24 hours later, right? That's the one flow that I kind of want to show. All right, while we're waiting for the other stuff to still process, because it's probably still going. Let me check here. Oh, is this one of the bad things about Codex is that I think I overuse it, and I don't think their memory management for their UI has been very well thought out. So
Oh yeah, I noticed the same thing. It was probably
yeah,
the same developer on what was their video generator. I don't have a subscription anymore, but I noticed the same thing.
Sora, yeah.
So they probably use
yeah.
the same developer because they have the same problem.
Yeah, no, their memory management shit is shit. So, yeah, okay, cool. So let's go back to the home server stuff. Okay, in the home server stuff, you can see here that it removed and modified a bunch of stuff. So here's what it did. Let's load the diff. Okay, so here you can see it renamed it to business server. It changed all of the options here to all of the different things that I gave it, right? It highlighted, so it removed all of this stuff and it added all of this stuff. And here it's showing you the commercial SaaS that's implemented. So let's just go ahead and create the PR. Let's make sure it doesn't fail. Create the PR. But you can see here all the files that it changed. It basically deleted all the previous stacks and it added all the new ones, right? It removed all of this stuff. And you can kind of see the changes that it made. Yeah, this is why memory management sucks. It's going to freeze up on me. All right. Yeah. Okay. So let's see if we can get to GitHub. Okay. So you can see here, I'm not going to merge this in because I probably just need to create a new repository called Business Server that hosts all these, so I don't lose all the work that I got over the holidays for home server. But what I would basically do now is I would, basically put this under a new repository called Business Server. It would have all of these changes sort of in play. And then I could basically just run, like if I go into here and I go into here, I could basically just take all of this into my infrastructure Terraform, run it against, in this case, it would be 86.66, not 38, and see it run. And so I'm not going to do that right now, but you get the idea here that I might do this later for another one, but you can see the idea here that it's go when I run it on Antigravity, if an error comes up, I'll feed that into Antigravity, and basically it will allow me to go through the flow and go through the process of repairing the stuff that basically Codex broke in its implementation in real time, right? So and also for additional context, the reason I'm using this GitHub desktop, for decades I was sort of like a CLI, like never use a GUI for anything kind of guy. I was a Linux developer for 10 years, and I sort of was forced into using GitHub Desktop for CACI, specifically for FMBT. A lot of stuff within FMBT I'm not allowed to access unless I have very specific permission requirements. And because it's all GitHub Enterprise, it's just like, fuck it, I'm gonna break my own rule. I'm gonna go in and get GitHub Desktop working on the jump boxes and on my GFE, so I can pull stuff into my GFE rapidly and easily. I don't have to keep typing out all the commands everywhere and or setting each each environment having to set up it, the SSH keys and all this other stuff. And it's actually been a pleasant experience. And so I've almost reversed my position against doing everything in CLI. I still do stuff in CLI. I still push and pull sometimes in CLI, but for the most part, GitHub Desktop has served me well. It's actually what I installed for my son on his machine, so he can prioritize coding and has to worry less about learning Git directly. I'll teach him Git eventually. But one of the things that I did here is I did go into settings. So my default used to be VS Code. And when I switched over to Antigravity, I did go into settings and I modified here to point to, I did this on Windows too. So if you guys start playing with a different tool, whether it's Cursor, whether it's Antigravity, you can basically just come in here and essentially make the modification to choose a different app to run. And then when you click on it, it'll open up, in this case, Antigravity, and it's home server, and you get the idea, right? So yeah, so that's kind of the flow that I wanted to show off. Is that sort of implementation to get something for review. The idea here is that, and for context too, yesterday, when I was working on a bunch of stuff, I kind of wanted to just knock out all of these page speed items for ClearCore and for zCore. And so I just basically started going through the process of what I just showed you, creating those multiple PRs for review, pulling this stuff down, running it locally, making sure that it functions and it doesn't break anything, and so forth and so on. And so you can relatively easily, like if I were to go into here, I could go in to pull requests. I can view the pull requests that I just created, which is the replace business home media with a business focus PR, and open up that branch. So I really like now. I feel like I'm late. That 30-year-old me would call me a lazy developer for not doing everything in command line, but I like the flow that this gives me in terms of just keeping everything organized. Any questions?
My only one question is, would you say that this is something that is more like relevant, like new to a lot of you? Like, is this something that has been adopted already, or something that's kind of new and you're tinkering with it?
So this launched last year, and before this launched last year, my flow was a lot different, in fact. But a lot of the stuff that makes this usable, that makes this work, is the CI/CD aspects of it, right? Like if I go into here, like having the at least the lint build test aspect in place, so that when you're creating PRs, you're testing to make sure that the agent basically wrote good code, that it builds properly, and that it tests properly. In this case, there are no tests for ClearCore, but yeah, we'll get to that. We'll implement that eventually, and I'll probably use some of the same processes to write a lot of those tests and get those tests out essentially for us. But the idea here is that you have to sort of put, it's like bowling with bumpers, right? Like you need those bumpers in place first before you can really move very, very quickly and very efficiently. And so the process itself that I showed you guys is only like a year old, but I've been using it for the last year and it's been great. And this is my preferred process. I actually prefer this over doing something like Claude Code and so forth, primarily because and this is really like the way that I see this is you kind of get into model LLMs and models based off of where you're at, right? If this was me 10 years ago, I'd have loved Claude Code. Like Claude Code would have been my jam, because that was when I was doing most of my development on device. I was pushing up and having other people review my PRs. When I started getting into this 3 years ago, I was already at a point where I was doing most of the PR reviews and analyzing people's work. And so the idea of having a Codex type application, I was building something like this already, back in 2023, that I was using myself. I open sourced it. It's up on my personal GitHub. But this is way more feature functional. Obviously, it's got more capacity. It's cheaper because OpenAI basically offsets the cost of using Codex in order to garner adoption. So for the most part, this is my preferred flow because it was where I was already at when Agentic sort of started to become a thing, right? And so really the adoption that people are going to prefer is going to be based off of where they're at in their career. So somebody who's more junior is going to probably prefer something like Cursor because it's an IDE that also does agentic work. The reason I like Antigravity is it's not necessarily a CLI tool. It's an IDE tool that sort of replaces VS Code for me. So it's really dependent on adoption is really going to be dependent on where you're at. To the thing that we were talking about before, Brooke. Let me just see. Claude Coworker. There. So this is the
Yeah,
tool that I was
I actually
mentioning.
went to the
Okay.
site.
Did you download it?
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So while I was like browsing it, I saw information around like, how to safely use it because, you are downloading it on your desktop. It is having
Yep.
access to like your files. And also it said like, don't use it. It suggests not to use it with Google Chrome. So I guess, is there anything else like you're aware of that I should know before I try to tinker with this?
Nope. Nope.
Okay.
And in fact, I would tinker away.
Okay.
Obviously it requires you to have a Claude Max subscriber account for now. It's pricey, so maybe try to get Eric to cover it. I've been trying to get Eric to cover our OpenAI or ChatGPT costs for a while now.
Yeah.
I'll keep bugging him about it.
We'll keep
I'll keep
trying.
sort of working on him. It just
Yeah.
makes the most sense to get everybody on board because you can, all the stuff that I was showing you guys on Codex with a business account. Like I can send a link to I can send a link to the Codex URL to Mike, and he can basically go in there and request changes. For now, all he can really do is review my PR. But with an actual ChatGPT account or with a Claude account, he can actually interact with what I've interacted with and make changes and modifications and suggestions in the tool, if that makes sense. So that would be ideal, but we'll see how far I can sort of push Eric in that sense. But yeah, like I would just go in and play with it. Like,
Okay.
but my thinking here is even if Codex costs me, and keep in mind that this is a personal family ChatGPT account, so my kids are all on it. My daughter won't stop messing up my history by just generating a ton of animated figures for her to color book in and that sort of thing, right? And so like obviously it's already useful for me in my personal life. And so $20 a month for me to basically move quickly on a lot of my work stuff is a no-brainer. Especially it's even rate limited, it's a no-brainer for me to just put in and use this for work and for personal projects like the home server thing that I was talking about before. So I would highly recommend just doing it, getting into it, playing with it. Do it for a month, see if it improves your workflow at all. See if it does the thing that you need it to do in terms of just speeding up your process. And if it's worth it after you've tested it for a month, then make the case for Eric to do it and support it. At one point with ChatGPT, I think because I was trying to do so many things at once and kept getting rate limited, I tried the 200 a month plan for like 2 months, just so that I can knock out as much shit as I could in that 2 month time window. And it was great. Like it was expensive, but it was worth the cost of just getting I had a list of things that I needed to get done for those 2 months to make it worth it. And so I just basically doubled down and was staying up late in the evenings, just getting through as much of that stuff as possible so that I could say that the money was worth the cost, if that makes sense. And then eventually I came back down to the $20 a month stuff. And then, in terms of, and so it's really about how much productivity do you get out of it. If you do it for a month and you get a ton of productivity for it, and Eric says no, okay, great. Is it worth it to you to be more productive and continue using the tool regardless? And in my case, it really is. I think right after I did the Codex experiment, I did downgrade, but then I was going through Antigravity and I was having Antigravity do a bunch of shit for me. And during that period, doing this stuff with anti-gravity, I realized like I was getting rate limited by Google at that point. So I was like, all right, fuck it. I'm gonna try for like a month. And this was December timeframe. I'm gonna try for like a month the $125 thing just to see if it's worth it. And it turned out anti-gravity wasn't as worth it as the Claude code as that the Codex stuff. And so I downgraded my Google account back to normal, if that makes sense. And so it's going to really depend on what you feel is useful to you. It's going to really depend on how you feel the implementation and the work is useful. And if you feel like it's useful, great. That's exactly what that's exactly the approach that I recommend taking. If you feel like it's not useful, downgrade. The reason I can say that the anti-gravity was not useful and that Codex was useful from just an implementation perspective is because of the asynchronous nature of the agents, right? With anti-gravity, I have to run a localized device, so I can't run 10 different things at once. Like it has to be one item at a time. A long time, like a year ago or 2 years ago, I thought about the idea of coming up with something that basically would generate a Docker container and kick it off and do all this stuff in a container. Um, haven't gotten to the point where I've implemented that yet, but I may still do it. In order so I could potentially use something like anti-gravity, but at scale, right? Like use a bunch of it. And if that were the case, I might come back to the more expensive Gemini account just to test out my theory to see whether or not that's going to be more productive. But for now, Codex is the more productive tool because again, the asynchronous nature, I can just kick off a job, come back to it like you saw with coming back to the business server stuff, and then see what I did, see how it turned out, create the PRs. Again, all of the process flow you need to have bumpers in some capacity so that whatever it is that you're doing it is organized in some capacity. In your case, Brooke, your organizational skills in terms of how you organize your folders, how you structure your folders are ideal for this kind of work because the more organized your data is, the more organized your process is, the more the model can read and understand your organizational style and follow it to a T, right? And so I always joke that, because I'm anal retentive when it comes to coding, to coding and development and testing. And so my anal retentiveness in my testing tends to benefit me because the model will understand what it is that I want. I want a test with every PR. I want, this and that. And it will do it, basically. It will do exactly what I'm asking it to do without question, and that could be a bad thing if you're disorganized. It can be a really good thing if you're anal retentive about your work and you're highly organized. And the model will see that the high level of organization and it will try to mimic it in that process. Does that make sense?
Yes, sorry, I was trying to get off mute.
Okay.
And actually, I think that based off of, what I've heard and seen here, definitely this has my interest, and I think it could be, definitely something valuable with like the SharePoint folder structure and, all of that. So I definitely am going to play around with this. Thank you for sharing.
Cool. Yeah, the one hard part is going to be it's going to have access to everything on your local machine. So
Right.
if you want to really take advantage of it, I would recommend making sure that whatever SharePoint stuff you're doing, that it's replicated on your local hard drive so that it knows to manipulate your local hard drive. I don't think Microsoft is going to give it permissions on SharePoint directly. One of my tasks on the FMBT side is to basically do SharePoint integration, which I hate. I've been using SharePoint since 2000 2000 something,
Way back.
2006, 2006, 2007, and I hated it even back then. So yeah. For the most part, like just keep in mind that this is not going to have access to APIs or remote stuff. This is going to have access to your local environment, to your local
Got it.
files. And so just organize everything locally, maybe sync it with SharePoint, but organize all of it locally as best as you can, and then let it rip, basically.
Okay.
Let it rip and do the things that it needs to do.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Mike, any comments, any thoughts before we break? He's probably eating breakfast. Stevie, any thoughts, comments? I think they're all eating breakfast. All right. I'm gonna let y'all go because we're almost out of time. Next week, depending on if Stephen, if you want to talk a little bit about the the CLI tool that you've been using, that would be awesome. If not,
Yeah.
I have some stuff I can dig into. I can probably the next thing I'll talk about, whether it's next week or the week after, is going to be how to do dependency fixes and stuff like that, or because I do a lot of, you guys have already seen it. I do a lot of automation of Dependabot updates and stuff like that. So how do I fix those updates and so forth, or maybe even get into the GitHub runner stuff and how I use agentic tools for that. So
Yeah, I should be. I'm focusing all my free time on
yeah, that's
memorizing
fine.
and doing study questions. But
Understood.
yeah, I think as agents become more relevant, I think in the future developers will mostly just be QAs.
Yep. And
But
that's not a bad thing.
yeah, no, yeah. So that's kind of why I'm really focusing on these QA exams. But okay, cool. Well, I'll take it. Thanks for doing that, Bassus. I'll probably see if I can set up one of those once I have more time. If I can set up Copilot or something for pull requests for my personal project, that'd be kind of useful. But
Cool.
otherwise, appreciate it.
All right, y'all. Y'all have a good rest of your day if I don't chat with you.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, you too. Bye.